Welcome to another episode of Fullcourt Passport. I'm Ric Bucher. That is Bostjan, Boki, Nachbar. We are going to be joined at some point by Detroit Pistons president of basketball operations, Trajan Langdon. He was a number one pick for the Cleveland Cavaliers, spent 3 years in Cleveland before heading overseas, where he was a two-time EuroLeague champion. Was a member of the 2000 to 2010 EuroLeague All-Decade Team, EuroLeague Final Four MVP. We've got a lot to talk to him about, Boki, in terms of just how his EuroLeague experience, his international experience, impacted how he is doing his current job with the Pistons, who are the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, have really grown and risen under his direction. But good to see you again, my friend. And so we're going to start overseas with some wild times. We're going to talk about Partizan anyway because of Mika Murinen making the decision to go there and leave AZ Campus, his academy school in the U.S. But there's been so much else going on with Partizan that almost seems like a secondary topic.
Yeah, it's funny. You said it's a crazy week in EuroLeague. For us who've been living EuroLeague for years or even decades,
It's just another week.
I wouldn't go as far as say just another week, even though you said
Right.
it almost correctly. But these things happen. You go through some of those things where we're now still in November, and you have another two coaches who are basically not EuroLeague coaches anymore. One is Igor Kokoško in Efes, which didn't have a good start of the season. A lot of injuries, tough schedule. Didn't go off to a great start, and it just led to him being fired, being let go. And don't forget, Igor Kokoško is a great coach. He's won Eurobasket with Slovenia, with Luka and Goran Dragic in 2017. He's been NBA coach in the past. It's just the nature of EuroLeague and the pressure that comes with being a coach of this league. And then connected to Partizan, that's the one that is really crazy and still kind of unresolved as we're talking about this, because the legendary coach Obradović stepped down earlier this week after team's poor performance. I'm not sure if it was one game out of 7 that they've only won or something similar, but they're on the bottom of the standings in EuroLeague currently, or at least the bottom part. And crazy things happened. So he stepped down. So he was not fired. He stepped down, stays in Athens after the team's loss. Team travels back. He's not anymore part of the team, at least not in his view. The club doesn't accept his resignation. So he flies back to Belgrade to talk this out and to work this out.
Mm-hmm.
Lands at the airport in Belgrade, and there's thousands of people, at least it looked like in videos, thousands of people, fans waiting for him at the Belgrade airport, basically pleading to him not to resign and to stay with the team. And some of those images that anybody can find online to see, how he was received there.
Yeah.
That's unlike anywhere else. That's unlike anywhere else that you can have in the middle of the night or in the evening, whatever the time was,
Right.
fans waiting at the airport and basically pleading coach to stay. It just tells you the love that fans there have for the club, have for this legendary coach, and what it means for them. So we'll see what the final decision is, whether he stays on as a coach or not. But you said it correctly. It's another crazy week in EuroLeague.
Yep. Let me introduce our guest, Trajan Langdon, president of basketball operations for the Detroit Pistons, Duke grad, number one pick for the Cleveland Cavaliers in 1999. Spent 3 years with the Cavs before heading overseas to become a two-time EuroLeague champion, EuroLeague Final Four MVP, national champion in 3 different countries, if I'm not mistaken, member of the 2000-2010 EuroLeague All-Decade Team, and now running what is the best team in the Eastern Conference. Trajan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me, Rick, and great to see you and Boki. So thank you. Hopefully you're saying the same thing about us being number one in the Eastern Conference in March. That would be great.
Yes, agreed. You have a rather unique background, not only in terms of having played overseas and being in your current position, but played baseball, professional baseball, while playing basketball at Duke. So I'm going to assume no regrets in not following a baseball career at this point.
Yeah, no regrets at all. I think it really helped mold me into the person and the athlete that I became, because those years playing minor league baseball were incredibly humbling, and I wasn't very good. But 13 $13 a day meal money in places that you would never frequent, really humbled me in between collegiate seasons at Duke.
And Trajan, how much do you think your unique background, like you're first Alaskan to play in the NBA, your math and history major at Duke, and then, like you just said, playing minor league baseball and all the college experience, how did all that prepare you for, just playing basketball overseas where you really made your name and your career?
Yeah, Boki, that's a great point. I think one thing that gets lost in that too is I played on 3 different USA teams, and obviously each team we traveled internationally. And so the first team that I played for in the summer of '94, we went to Santa Rosa, Argentina. Second team in '95, we went to Athens, Greece, and in '98 went to Athens, Greece with the team. So I think all of those experiences, especially seeing international basketball, when I did made the decision to play over at Benetton in Treviso, a place very well.
Yeah.
I went over with the right mindset, understanding that the coaches are knowledgeable, understanding the players and the teams are very good and highly competitive, and that I wasn't just going to roll in there and just be the team savior and be great at that level. I knew I was going to have to work. I knew I was going to have to be humbled. And I just knew from that atmosphere that I was going to need to go and fit in as well. And I think fortunately for me, that atmosphere in Treviso with that team that had already won, it made the transition even easier.
How has your international experience shaped the way you have built this Detroit Pistons team?
That's a really good question. I think my experiences, not only internationally as a player, but also with some very good leaders that I've played for or been around. Coach K, Rudy T, my high school coach was great. Ettore Messina in Europe, and then growing up with the Spurs in terms of my executive knowledge and experience. R.C. Buford and Pop, and seeing a championship there. All those things together, I think, make me understand. I know what I think I feel. I know what winning looks like in different places around the world and here at home in different levels. And so from an environmental standpoint, I know what that feeling needs to be. I know what the players need to feel every day, and they need a feeling of support and that they can be the best versions of themselves, and whatever they need, we want to be able to give them every day, and from a staff standpoint as well. And so we all feel like we're galvanized and together, because Boki, once things turn negative and they turn quote unquote toxic, it's hard to get the players back when trust is lost. And so for us, it's fighting for that environment every day, front office, performance team, coaching staff, to make sure these players feel like they're being supported at a high level. That's not everything, but I think it's a lot that goes into winning atmospheres.
Yeah, and you just mentioned Coach Messina a little bit earlier. Like we had a crazy week in EuroLeague. I spoke with Rick earlier, just briefly about this, and we're gonna get into this a little bit later on. Like last week, Coach Messina actually stepped down from his position in Milano, and this week, Igor Kokoško, got fired in FS, and as you probably saw, Željko Obradović stepped down in Partizan. And they're trying to get him back now. But the point is, you worked closely with Coach Messina, and I just wanted to just hear your experience by being, for a few, I don't know how many seasons, but it's been a bunch. I think in Benetton first, and then definitely in CSKA Moscow for a long period. What did you take from his experience? Because many players now are saying that with him, it's not just purely basketball; it's also what it teaches you for going on for life, and the knowledge that you get from him as one of the greatest European coaches.
Yeah. So I obviously learned of Ettore from Maurizio Gherardini, who was our GM in Benetton. And so my first interaction in being recruited over there was from Maurizio and talking about Ettore. And when I got over there, a lot of respect for the man, incredibly intelligent. I think he has a high care factor, very thoughtful in his approach, not only to the game of basketball, but in terms of how he managed the team throughout the season. I compared him a lot to Coach K, just in terms of he's very detail oriented, likes to keep the game simple, but there isn't anything he misses. From a physical standpoint, he doesn't wear you down, but you are going to be prepared from a mental standpoint, because he gets on you every day, because he understands what winning is and what it takes to win. It needs a high level of discipline, a high level of detail. And for him, it was being that every day. And so he was on veterans, he was on the young guys, because we knew, and he knew at the end of the day, if you didn't have to think about what you needed to do, it would make you react quicker in the most stressful situations. So if you get doubled and it was get rid of the ball, it didn't matter if it was game 1 or game 65. By that time, when you're in the Final Four playing against Maccabi and you're in front of 12,000 rabid Tel Aviv Maccabi fans, if you didn't know what to do with a split second, you're probably going to turn it over and it's going to cost you the game. Whereas if you wore you down and you made sure of the details, you didn't have to think about it regardless of the environment. And so for me, it was tough at times playing for him, but you knew at the end of the day, he's just preparing you to win championships, and it's all worth it once you do that. But I just think the difference with players nowadays is they don't understand the big picture and the reasoning behind the day-to-day approach, and the reason why he is so detail-oriented and sometimes can be difficult. But I had a lot of respect and appreciation for him in the 5 years I played with him. You're right, Boki. I played from 1 year at Benetton and then 4 years in Moscow. So, look, man, every year I played for him, we got to the Final Four. Every year I played for him, we got to the actual final game, and won championships at Benetton 1 year and then 4 straight in Russia. So there were hard times, but I wouldn't have him do it any other way.
Speaking of Russia, you spent the better part of your career overseas there. That is not an easy place for, I think, anyone to necessarily, outside of being Russian, to excel there. But particularly, I think for Americans, it's a bit of a culture shock, and maybe weather-wise and everything, it's a challenge. Why do you think that you were able to not only endure but thrive in many ways as a player in Cheska?
So obviously weather wasn't a problem for me coming from
as an Alaskan. Yeah.
I think Boki can speak to it. Like, we don't like the cold, but we can deal with the cold, right?
Yeah,
it's anything we're going to be scared of. But Moscow is an incredible city. I think that Boki can speak to as well. Incredible culture, incredible restaurants. Russians can, at first, if you don't understand the culture, you can be taken aback by their harshness at first, but it's a hard exterior and a warm interior. Like once they bring you in and they respect you and they trust you, you have a friend for life there. And so I really enjoyed my time there with the people once I got to learn what the culture and the people were about. But again, we had a ton of support. Ettore was a great coach. Mikhail Prokhorov was our owner the first 3 years, but my whole 6 years there at CSKA, we had great ownership, great leadership, which allowed us. They gave us the resources that we needed, and we had good teams too. Let's not get. They spent money, and we had a lot of talent, some of the best players at our positions. And I just think we had a framework of winning. The rosters we put together, we were positionally pretty big. We were defensive oriented. We were smart. We were tough, and we were competitive, which I think is the formula to be competitive and ultimately win at a high level. I think what gets forgot is my first year at Dinamo was the year that I almost didn't go there. I told the organization 3 times no, that I'm not coming, and every time they raised the money, and finally my agent called me and said, are you an idiot? You're about to make the biggest mistake of your career turning this contract down. So got on a plane 2 days later. The Dinamo experience my first year was a bit different than my 6 years following that. We were a little bit new and naive to high-level European basketball resources, what it takes to win at that level. We had a really good roster, but I think attention to detail was missed because everybody was new at that level. We competed lost in the finals against CSKA. I had a fun year, but I definitely was introduced to Moscow in a lot of different ways, and taken to another level once I left Dynamo and went to CSKA the following year.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I appreciate, Trajan, is that you very quietly are correcting my pronunciation. Like Seska, Dynamo, like I'm learning as I go, and I'm picking it up, and you guys are not hitting me over the head with it, but I appreciate that you're like, hey, stop Americanizing everything, okay? Like, this is the way they say it there, and this is the way we're going to say it. I appreciate that.
We'll try to do that, Rick, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
But going back kind of to your role now, or just kind of your vision of the NBA today, why are we seeing, at least it feels like, and it looks like, the basketball is seen differently. International basketball is seen differently now from the NBA's perspective. You have so many, not just players, but also international coaches, head coaches now running the show, GMs who are international people, who are people who maybe have, big ties with international basketball, never even, played or worked in international basketball before, but now they're running the show. How do you see that? Why is that? What does international game bring to the NBA in your view?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the things from the international game that a lot of people don't understand that are now apparent in our game, right? The first time that I saw stretch four was in Europe, right? Matias Šmodić, when I went over there, played stretch four, right? Mirsad Turkan stretch four, right? Even you stretched 3-4, but you played stretch four. And just what that does from an offensive standpoint in opening up the game, creating movement. Usually stretch fours are, I hate to say it, a little bit smarter players because they're better passers. They can put it on the deck. They can make reads that put the other defenses in difficult situations. And therefore, usually at the end of the floor, they're more versatile defenders as well. So just kind of the intellect behind the game in Europe, I felt was in front of that of the NBA. And going from my 3 seasons over there, I felt it's not that the NBA game wasn't a smart game. It was a different game. It was just played differently. In the time that I was there, it was a lot of iso ball. There was a lot of lifting to put people in situations where they can isolate their defender and attack the weakest spot on the floor with the strongest player from the other team. And that was rarely thought of in European play. It was move the ball, get the other teams moving, get us moving, ball movement, body movement. And I think in terms of, as you've seen in the last 25 years, the game of the NBA has truly changed, and it's gone towards more of that kind of European style. And therefore, the intrigue of having those European coaches that were instituting that style of play becomes more prominent. It becomes more popular, and then it's ultimately more important to have those people here. And then all of a sudden you have the players too that think that way, that have been taught that way, that have been trained that way. So that style of game is kind of more inherent to the way that they play and the way that they've been taught growing up. So I think that's the influx. And obviously with the NBA game becoming a global game, a lot of these guys, Luka Doncic grows up watching Boki Nachbar, right? And the way he plays, and he comes over, and then all of a sudden, because he's watching Boki, now he's watching the entire league, right? And then that player is picking up different things and strategies from people that they're watching on TV. So the influence of a couple guys coming over and then more guys coming over from Europe and playing at a high level and actually not sitting the bench, but impacting winning, I think has influenced that younger generation of watching the game. And then therefore they're not just watching their people from their home country. Now they're watching the best players in the world and the best league in the world and getting that inspiration. So that's my story there.
One of the things that strikes me about your Pistons team is the chemistry of the team and how the personalities mesh. And I don't always see that taken into account in team building. And I don't want to give you credit for something that you may not have, you may have just fallen into, but I would think that because of your varied experience, both in the roles that you've played in various places as a professional, as well as just your overall experience, your wealth of knowledge in so many different places with basketball, that there was some intention behind that. What is it that you have leaned on in terms of your experience to build this team the way that you have?
Well, I appreciate your insight and you're seeing that. Obviously, you never know how teams are going to come together once you build them. Every year, I learned that from Coach K and Pop is every year with a team is a new life, right? And that team has one life. So we have a lot of returning guys from last year, but this is a completely different team with a completely different mindset. And I think one thing that's always been important to me and that I learned from the Spurs is the idea of continuity. And I think this team had 3 different coaches in 3 years last year. And so a lot of those players are seeing their third system in the third year, which becomes really hard for younger players to understand and adapt to a different offensive and defensive system at this level. It's so intricate. There's so much to it that to have now a level of consistency from last year to this year, not only with a lot of the players, but also with the coaching staff that's going to implement the exact same system and maybe sprinkle in some new things to be a little bit more effective coming into the second season, I think has been incredibly important for us to take a leap as well. But yeah, it is intentional with the human beings and the characters that in terms of high level human beings and high character that we bring on the roster, because you never know, as you've seen here early in the season, when injuries are going to happen. We need guys that are going to be ready and understand their roles and try not to do too much, but do what is needed from them, from the organization. And that's what we've had in both years. And we've had a really good mix here early on with success, and everybody has felt that. I think when you can have a team where everybody feels like that they're part of the success, we're 15-3, but everybody has actually impacted those wins in this record. And there's a lot of times if you're completely healthy that you're only getting 9 or 10 players that are able to do that. And I think that's the silver lining with the injuries here early on, is that everybody feels like they're part of this team.
Trajan, before we let you go, maybe a bit of a selfish question on my end. Selfish for the reason because I'm personally really interested in because I'm in a, as a former player, see things very similar than you when you finish your career and then you jump into something else. I'm just wondering about your transition. Like, how did you prepare for that? What kind of plan you had? And if I could connect this question also to, you getting ready for having an NBA role and then studying everything that comes with it, including the CBA, including the salary cap, because that's not something that, we have in Europe, at least not that complicated. Can you just talk about that transition and you spending time and preparing for what you do now?
Yeah, I didn't know, Boki. My last year at Cisco, about halfway through the year, I knew that was going to be my last year playing. I wouldn't say that I thought about it at that point until we won at Himki, I remember, and me saying to the media with J.R. Holden at the same time that we're done, and then moving my family back to the U.S. and then starting to think about, I'm going to take a year off, but I'm going to take this year to think about ultimately what I want to do. And at that point, I didn't know if it would still be in basketball. But I think I had to decide whether I wanted to take the coaching route or the executive route. And I didn't know where it was going to take me. But I've always been pretty curious. And I think a big skill for me in growing up has always been listen to people and try to be aware of your surroundings. And I think I give a ton of credit to the Spurs and my timing of being with them. The first year I was there was the year that we went to the finals and the Ray Allen shot, where we're right there to win in game 6. And that's a championship if he doesn't hit that shot. And what I learned from that summer from Pop, RC, and our whole front office was Pop's dedication and commitment to that group. We had a couple high-level players in free agency that wanted to come to play for the Spurs and would have made complete sense to add them to that roster. But the mindset was different from the people that had been with that group every day, which was, we're going to keep this team together and we're going to stay galvanized and we're going to feel this pain over the summer, but know that we're good enough to win. And no decision was made to add any future Hall of Famer, which we could have. And
who could you have had?
I can't say that. I can't say that. I just can't. But it would have been a really good small forward who was in the Hall of Fame, who scored, I think, 20 to 25,000 points.
That's enough, Trajan. I think I can do the work.
And they said no, and I was shocked.
Huh.
And they ran it back, or we ran it back, and we knew we beat OKC in the conference finals, but that was the toughest matchup because the only thing that team wanted to do was play Miami in the finals. That's what their goal, their target was the whole year. And so we knew when that matchup came, and they probably didn't know, but they didn't have a shot in hell to win that series. If you go back, that team moved the ball. They knew what they needed to do to beat that team, and that's exactly what they did. And it really resonated with me, the different decisions that were made not only in the summer but throughout the year to keep that team galvanized, because that was the most important thing for Pop and RC, was to let that team know that they were good enough and we're going to go back and get it again, despite all the pain that they felt in losing that finals the year before.
Last thing before we let you go, and again, appreciate all the time and the insight. When you are scouting international players or players that are playing overseas, what do you look for to be comfortable with the idea that they can make the transition, that they can play in the NBA? I know you don't have a whole lot of international players on the roster right now, or since you've been in Detroit, but I'm sure you look in that direction, or you do your homework in that direction. I'm just wondering, we've seen guys who have succeeded, and we've seen guys that, in spite of whatever they've done overseas, have not.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you think is the important ingredient to be able to make the shift from one to the other?
I think a huge thing just is mentality of the player. Like, are they going to be strong-willed, tough enough to come in this environment and still believe in themselves and be confident? I think ultimately that's the biggest thing. If they're a little bit soft as a competitor, or they're a little bit soft in their belief of themselves, it's never going to work here. The NBA is so competitive that, and they're going to be doubted just because that's the way it is. I'm sure Boki can attest to it. You come here, you're incredibly successful in Europe. These players don't care if you've been successful in your home country or with national teams. They literally do not care at all. So they don't give you that credit. You got to come in here and you got to earn it every day in practice, every day in games. And it doesn't matter if you're a two-time player of the year in Europe and you're a national champion or EuroLeague champion or a FIBA, World Cup champion. They just do not care. And so if that is what you think you need, it's just not going to work. So do you have the resilience, the mental toughness to come in here, compete for a spot, earn that spot, and then compete, not only that, but then compete in games to help your team win? I think ultimately that's the most important thing. And can you adapt to a different country? Like, everybody thinks here that it's America and you're just going to adapt to it. Well, that doesn't work for every foreign player in our country, and it doesn't work for every American in Europe or in other environments either. It is difficult to do, and it's not for everybody. And so we have to answer those questions before you even talk about, is the guy big enough, athletic enough, and skilled enough? Because they can be all that and get on the court and do that, but then everything off the court impacts them in a way that they just can't be the best version of themselves on the court. So I think that's what we're trying to create here, that no matter who it is that comes in here as a player, we're going to make them feel at home. We're making them feel like whatever resource they need is here for them. So it's not going to be the environment or this team that's going to impact them in a way that they can't succeed. But it is important to have the proper people here too, not only from a environmental standpoint, but the way that we play. We have an identity. We play tough, physical, defensive-minded basketball. And so if that player, regardless of where they're from, is not going to fit with our identity and the way they play, it's going to be difficult for them to succeed here as well.
Well said. Well, hey, listen, we wish you continued success, and it's not a surprise in hearing all of this conversation why you guys have been successful collectively and why you have risen the way that you have. So, Trajan, we wish you continued success, both personally and with the Pistons overall, and we look forward to seeing you guys make a run in April and May. Fingers crossed.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate the kind words. I couldn't do it myself. I got a lot of really, really good people here helping me out. So hopefully we can keep this thing going. So thanks so much.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right. That was Trajan Langdon. I said it to him, but I'll say it again here. Boki, it's really not a surprise that he has risen the way that he has as quickly as he has in the business. He was with the Pelicans prior to the Pistons. He was with the Nets prior to that, and has turned the Pistons around in very quick fashion. I just spent some time around them, and I know the chemistry and what they like being in the room with that group. They have something special. It's not an accident. It's not just the schedule that they are at the top of the Eastern Conference right now. And I think they are going to be a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the postseason.
No, for sure. And I think he remember him as a player, and I never played with him, but I played against him a ton. A guy that was always considered a hard worker, and a guy that was always not just a scorer, not just defender, but also at the same time kind of a glue guy on the team. And I can totally see that he kind of brought that mentality also to his executive role, where he brings this ton of experience, hardworking guy, understands the global basketball, and obviously was fortunate enough to work with some of the people that he mentioned that actually molded him into the executive he is today. And I think that's amazing to hear. Especially, like I said, remember him as an opponent back 15 years ago in EuroLeague.
Yeah, especially when you think of the time. I think he hit it. The time that he was with the Spurs and the emphasis that they put on continuity and chemistry, obviously, as they always have. And I know that Greg Popovich values that very highly. We had a conversation once where he was about this very thing, and he said, so he put the hypothetical out. He goes, what do you do if you have like a Kobe Bryant level talent, but it's someone who doesn't fit into the team? Mm-hmm. And he said, you have to make a decision. Like, do the guys enjoy playing with that player? Mm-hmm. And if you don't enjoy being around them, then the talent eventually is not going to be enough to pull you through as a team. And that's a very unique perspective for an NBA coach or executive. By and large, they always believe in the talent first and foremost. And certainly you have to have talent to succeed in the NBA. But there's degrees, right? In terms of the balance of chemistry and capability. And the San Antonio Spurs put a little more on the chemistry side of the ledger. And you see the same thing with the Pistons in terms of how they've built that team and how Trajan operates. So, and I think I wonder if you say that's an effect of EuroLeague too, in terms of how teams are built.
Could be, but I just want to say that it's really a fine balance, I think, between finding the right chemistry and having enough talent on the team to win. I think that on all leagues, all levels, I think just seeing it from the outside, clubs, teams, coaches, executives, they still struggle with that. I've been part of teams that had incredible talent, but the chemistry wasn't there, right? And I was part of the teams that we had great chemistry, not maybe the most talented teams, but we had success. So, but also, of course, there's the third component, right? You team with great chemistry and a lot of talent, and you still don't win sometimes. But that's why I say it's a very delicate thing, and how to balance all that out. But I do put a lot of importance on the chemistry. Like, if you're building something serious, like, you have to consider the chemistry. You have to consider the personalities. They have to fit together. Otherwise, I think you really almost don't have a shot, no matter how talented your team is. Whether we talk about NBA or EuroLeague. And I've seen, you've seen it in the NBA. I've seen it a bunch in EuroLeague. Like, teams that do win do have great chemistry, and it's not something that is only when you raise the cup and you say, "Hey, I'm the winner. We're all best friends now." It starts early, and it's visible early, and that's why teams that do put emphasis on that put themselves in a position to win.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our next topic. It's inspired by Mika Murinen. He was a Finnish. He was a sensation for Finland in EuroBasket over the summer. Actually, didn't play a whole lot, but he gained a lot of notoriety from some of the social media clips of him just crushing dunks. I think it was Slim Jesus was the nickname that he acquired, and he was playing for Bradley Beal's. In spite of being Finnish, he was over in Arizona playing for Bradley Beal's AAU team. He was supposed to be going to a high school academy, private school named AZ Campus, and shockingly decided that he was going to leave AZ Campus and went and signed a 1-year deal with Partizan over in EuroLeague. And so I just, when you saw that news, Boki, what was your first thought or reaction?
Honestly, my first thought or reaction was that I was also a 17-year-old kid who was in Partizan back in the day for a couple of weeks, trying to sign a contract there, which I actually did, but because of the rules back then of not being allowed to leave the country at a certain age, and I'm not going to get too much into that, I had to return back to Slovenia. Like Coach Obradović wasn't there at Partizan, but I actually was already in Belgrade as a 17-year-old kid practicing with the team. Signed contract, but it got annulled basically because of the rules that I could not leave Slovenia as a underage kid at that time.
So what did you how did you feel about that? Like, you're about to start as a pro for a great organization, and they pull the rug on you.
It was a very I want to call it maybe even a nasty situation back then, kind of a dispute, if you want to call it, between me and the Basketball Federation of Slovenia at that time. But but it was, I knew that other opportunities are going to be there, to be honest. Like, I knew I was on the radar of other teams, including Benetton, which Trajan mentioned, like Maurizio Gardini and that program, which I think it was better for me. 2 years later, I signed there and played there and had tons of success and got drafted. So I knew there was going to be other opportunities. But looking back now, to be able to play for Partizan and that crazy fan atmosphere and all that, I think it would be definitely something that I would never forget. So, but anyways, that was the first thing that I thought about, like young kid going there, right? Like I never had that opportunity, even though I was like so close. But it was surprising, especially because it was late in the summer, after EuroBasket. He signed there. But the reasons, I think, in my opinion, are clear. Like, number one, improve, learn from the best. Talking about Coach Obradović. And exposure, right? Play at the EuroLeague level, play against best players in Europe, and then whatever the next step is, whether you go to NCAA or whether you go draft an NBA or you stay in EuroLeague for a couple of years, I think probably his mindset and people around him was, let's put him in this great situation where he's visible and he can improve at the same time and go from there, which I think is kind of logical now that I think about it.
I thought it was a smart move. Just in watching him play in EuroBasket, knowing how, whether it's AAU or high school basketball or private school basketball, depending on the program, and especially with a player of his notoriety, like he's already known, so he's going to be treated differently in high school. He's going to be Mr. Everything. And looking at his game and the thought of him playing pro and playing in the NBA, it just struck me he needs to be in a much more disciplined program than I would have expected that he would have gotten playing in the AZ Campus. And not that I know that much about their program. I could be not giving them enough credit for the way that they're run. But compared to Partizan, compared to EuroLeague in a professional setting, it's without question, he's going to a more disciplined situation. And people were critical of or questioned the move because they didn't expect that he was going to get as much playing time in actual games. And I'm less worried about that for him in terms of where I think that he needs to improve as a player. I don't think he just needs the ball in his hands and game experience. I think he needs to learn what the thought process is in being an efficient pro playing within a system, because You watched Eurobasket, right? Like when things got critical, they took him off the floor. When they needed to execute, that's not when they had him on the floor. And usually he got pulled after doing something that broke what they were trying to do. So I thought it was a brilliant move. I hope that it works out with Obradović, so that because Mika himself said, I'm going there to play for Obradović, and now we know that that's up in the air. But even without that particular coach there, I think the environment and the atmosphere is going to be much better for him than it would have been if he had stayed in Arizona, as far as preparing to be a pro, whether it's overseas or it's in the NBA.
Yeah, I think you grow up fast when you're in this environment as a teenager. And by that I mean the amount of experience he's going to be able to absorb this season alone is going to be something that's going to stick with him for life, I'm sure. Not just because of the EuroLeague level and the physicality and the level of play that he's going to see in practice and in games, but also everything else that comes with it. The high pressure situations of crazy fans at home, on the road, high expectations of winning, which the team is now going through, including the situation with Coach Obradović. The team didn't start well, and look at the crazy situation that they're in now. That's just the nature of EuroLeague basketball. I think for a young kid like this to see that firsthand and to experience and to live that day in, day out is going to definitely put him in a situation where he's going to come out much more grown up as he would compared to maybe playing high school or academy basketball.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the game of the week. Fenerbahce. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, not bad. Not
and
bad.
Virtus,
yeah.
Bologna.
Yeah.
I almost was just going to say Bologna. I really wasn't sure. A very unusual game in terms of Fener winning 66-64. I thought I was watching a college basketball game from the 1980s.
Yeah.
I was like, this is North Carolina Duke from back in the day when Dean Smith was there, right? It was very much a grind of a game. And yet at the same time, I found it entertaining because I think that the difference in the score was no greater than 6 points at any point along the way. And it really it felt to me like a battle of wills. And I thought it was great that I think the game-winning basket was a tip-in off of a third offensive rebound.
Yeah.
That ended up being the difference in that game. That seemed to be perfect for the way this game was played.
For sure. I mean, it kind of describes the game, like you said before, a grind, not a pretty one. But, and if not a pretty one, but still an interesting one to watch. And I think if you asked me this question 10, 15 years ago, I would tell you that's a normal EuroLeague type of game, a grind, low scoring game, not even reaching 70 points, just that's how basketball was played in Europe in majority of games, maybe previous decades. Now it's a rarity to have a game like this. Like we've seen scores spike up this season, especially, games in the high 80s, 90s, even hundreds.
Yep.
So to have a game like this where the score is so low, it's rare nowadays. It's kind of weird me saying that. I think people who are obviously familiar with the basketball in Europe will totally get that. Like we were always almost proud about the fact that our games were low scoring games where it's a grind kind of game and you're so tactically prepared that you know every play of the other team and you're shutting it down possession after possession. So that's why this game was kind of an outlier, but still a huge win for Fenerbahce. They're still trying to get back into the rhythm that they had last season. Obviously, the team has changed a little bit, just like other teams, but I still think down the road they're going to be a dangerous team in the spring. And Virtus is, in my opinion, playing, for the roster that they have. I think some people probably thought that they're going to be an easier matchup for teams like Fenerbahce or some others, but they've been playing really well, I think, for the roster they have, and they could be a dark horse down the line where they can potentially sneak into this top 10 that we have and the play-in that they have. Like, they're in the position right now to still be there. So we'll see how it goes. Of course, depending on the injuries and everything else, but they're putting themselves in a position to be a dangerous team as well. And as a minimum, disrupt somebody else's plans with a tough game or tough loss that the other team wouldn't expect to have against them.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that does it for this episode of Full Court Passport. We covered a lot and we went in a lot of different directions, but that's the beauty of this show, is that we have the opportunity to do that with Trajan Langdon and looking at everything that he experienced, and then the Mika Murinen, which ties right into what we've been talking about in terms of how international players prepare themselves to be pros, whether it's in the NBA or overseas. It still remains to be seen whether Mika is going to come back and, potentially play in college and then go, or does he stay in EuroLeague? And obviously the objective for him and for most players is, can I get to the NBA, and what's the path to get there? And it's most interesting with international players in terms of how they're going to go about that, because they have different options there. So Boki's coming to us from Las Vegas. He's been in the States for the last week or so. He's looking worse for the wear, as anybody who's watching the show might know. But I'm sure you're going to get back home soon and rest up, my friend, so we can continue.
Yeah. It's been long 2 weeks here in the States, just in different cities, obviously all connected with, let's say, basketball and family. But yeah, looking forward to go home. And next time I'll talk to you is going to be back from my home. So that's By the
way, I had an opportunity to see Tara Nachbar play. And as I said to Boki while we were sitting there, even though they were playing the Ohio State champions and they lost the game, I said, Tara's going to be a problem. And indeed she is. She's carrying the legacy of the Nachbar family in basketball very well, my friend. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate it, and I got to return the favor sometime soon and watch your daughter play as well at the earliest opportunity that we can get live. I mean, in person. So that's a promise as well. All right,
we'll make that happen. All right, Boki. Until next time.
All the best.